If you're playing Harry Potter Wizards Unite, this is the Auror Profession Skill Tree Guide. So if you want to know how to best spend your scrolls in the early game, mid game, late game, well, you came to the right place. If you're curious about the other professions, subscribe to SwagTips and I'll get those videos out soon enough. And if you're watching this in the future, well, maybe they're linked in the description already. But let's get into the Auror here. And the table I'll be using is from the Auror page on GamePress, so link in the description to that if you want to reference the skill tree here yourself. So one main defining characteristic to the Auror profession is how early they're able to get power gains, which makes them generally the highest damaging class in the game, which is really nice. However, there are also several pitfalls involved in the early game and in the late game of the Auror profession tree, given the relative benefit of a lot of these skills. So in the early game, I'd say, grabbing this skill and then grabbing these guys are pretty much fine. If you want to be super optimized about it, then you could go for just the power here and avoid the Protego, but both of these are cheap enough where it's like whatever. Similarly, the Bat Bogey Hex is basically useless, but it only costs 5 scrolls, so like why not? And I'm pretty sure a lot of you starting out have already done this, so it's like whatever, right? Then next up to bat, we got this power gain right here. And yeah, it's cheap, early, easy power, so you may as well power it up. Now, here we have our first split. You can either go the critical route or you can go the stamina route. Two things to keep in mind is in the early game, stamina really doesn't matter. You're not going to be taking enough hits for it to really matter for grinding. The best kind of grinding is going for the one fortress, level 1 with just the 1 stone, right? So nothing's going to kill you there. And then as far as precision and critical power go, well, mathematically, they're not really worth it either. Yeah, so if you saw my video on precision and crit, link in the description, you'd know that the relative value of these skills compared to power just really isn't there. So what you want to do here, most ideally, is to just take one here, and one here. That way you are able to access all this sweet, delicious power. I do want to make a little note here. In my critical video, I chose to take one and dones for this route. At the time, GamePress didn't have their page updated here, and I didn't know that you could access these power skills through this side of the tree. I didn't know that they were locked that way, so that's why I recommended the other path. At any rate, if you have already invested more into any of these skills, don't worry about it. There's no reset option other than deleting your account and starting over. And you're going to get enough scrolls anyways as the game goes on where you don't have to, don't stress about it. Just pick up from where you are and continue down the optimal pathway, right? So yeah, so going this route takes you to these nice, lovely, cheap power gains. And no real reason to hold off from grabbing this guy either. So if you do go into party play at all, you are able to benefit your teammates by passing that focus onto them. So now we got options. We got 3 different routes to power here. And what you're going to want to do for your power gains is to, do a little math, right? So just check out this guy and you'll see that that's 8 for 2 power. This is 12 for 13 power. And then this here is 10 for 2. So obviously these two are going to have a better value than this one. So you'll want to power up this right away and then power up this guy right away. Then going on down, you'll see that this one here is 10 for 2, which isn't so hot. This guy here is also 10 for 2. But if you look at this one, you'll see that it's 12 for 3, which is much better. So you may as well just take one here and then power this guy up. And then from there, power up your power as you see fit. Now, at any point during this part of the skill tree, you could choose to just take a one and done here and a one and done there to get to your Confusion Hex early. The Confusion Hex is nice. It does a minus 20 to the enemy's defense breach, to their dodge chance, and their defense. Higher level enemies in the game will have any one of these stats, so it could be really beneficial to just take care of that. But I'd say in the early game, definitely not that big of a deal, especially if you don't do party play and you're not trying to, push the hardest content in the game yet. So you can wait on this or you can grab it early. It's up to you. At any rate, from this point on, you're going to just want to power up the rest of your power here, and then you're all sorts of powered up. Now, one thing to keep in mind throughout all of this is that as you go down, there are these spellbook costs. Spellbooks are pretty easy to come by. I'm not having an issue with it, but you will also want to, spare out your spending based off of your spell books there. Spending spell books on power gains is always going to be better, but be mindful of how many spell books you have and how much power you're getting per spellbook as well, if that spellbook economy becomes an issue for you. Now at this point, you do have the option to increase your proficiency power, or you could increase your defense breach. Overall, I gotta say that this defense breach skill is absolutely not worth it, because 3%, 4%, 5%, you can just put on the confusion hex and you're getting 20, so yeah, it never adds up. Then as far as proficiency power goes, it's useful, but it's only useful against 1/3 of your encounters. So I think overall, you can wait on this skill. And it is at this point where the relative power gains you can get from any of your other skills is actually more costly than it is to max out this first branch of your crit tree. So as far as your spellbooks will allow, and as far as you will allow your spellbooks, I guess, power these skills up, because it is now finally worth it. Everything else below the confusion hex here costs so much that you may as well start powering up your stamina skills as far as your spellbooks will allow you to. And then similarly here, you can go for the stamina as well. Make sure to always check the math though. So 10 for 9, not too shabby. 12 for 9, kind of sucks. And then we got the defense gains here, 15 for 6%, 15 for 9%. The way I would handle this personally is I'd go stamina, and then go for this one, and then max out the defense first, and then double back for the stamina gains. And then of course, at any point during this, you can power this up as you feel is necessary. I'd say at this point, the skill tree is pretty well set up, and you're able to take on anything, so everything else is just kind of garnishing for your class. Now, when you have powered up basically everything here, but definitely ignoring defense breach because it doesn't matter, then you can consider going down further in this tree. Another thing you could consider when we are in this upper part, powering up things ad lib, if you do play in parties often, it could be well worth it to do this early on, so you can get to that initial focus, so you can pass focus to your teammates or spread your hexes around enemies that much more quickly. So that is another consideration you can have in all of this. And then from this point on, I guess the most optimal thing you can do is go one and done, one and done, one and done, and start progressing these final two power pieces here. Once again, making sure you pay attention to the benefit you get for the cost. And then from that point forward, it's all pretty whatever. I'd say going with your precision before going for anything else is probably good, because critting more often, I feel, is better than critting harder. So going for that. And then from this point, it's all pretty much a wash what you power up. As usual, if you pay attention to this, Protego power plus 2%, kind of meh. Stamina plus 11 for 32 scrolls, kind of meh. But this defense, 38 for 10%, not too shabby. So if you do get to powering up these skills, I'd go one and done, and then power this guy up, and then power these up as you feel is best. And that's basically the recommended pathway as far as spending your scrolls go. So to rehash early on, go for the power gains, skate through this list here so you can get to more power gains, of course. And then if you feel like it's worthwhile, go for this initial focus. Then after that point, everything down here is just way too expensive. So power up everything that you feel you can up here, ignoring defense breach because it doesn't matter. And then I guess going for the power gains, because that's the only thing that really matters at this point, and everything costs a lot, so it's kind of whatever. Now, at this point you might be wondering, what about them restricted section books? Well, I do have a restricted section guide in the description there if you want to check it out, but there's no reason that I can't give you this information here as well, so I'll let you know what my recommendations are. In general, I feel like the most optimal route for an R is to pick up this skill here first, just so they can access the starting focus, so they can pass that along to their teammates in group play. So if you're like an all-around cool guy R, you play with friends, then that is definitely a good decision. And then from there, going for this one here and then getting this one is pretty okay, because it's pretty cheap. It's not very costly. But if you want to be super optimal, or if you push really hard content all the time with your friends, well, then maxing out this guy before taking these two would probably be a good idea as well. But I think that's a pretty good starting point. And then from this point forward, you can pretty much power up whatever you want to with your next 15 books. You could just finish off all of your hexes here and have them nice and ready. Or you can go with Dancing with Dummies, which is a extra 35% precision, depending on how the skill is coded. Right now it says 100% enemy stamina, but the reality is that it takes effect after the enemy's first attack, regardless of their stamina. But 35% precision is enough to actually make it worthwhile. So I'd say this skill is definitely worth picking up as well. So however you want to handle that. And then after you finally go with Dancing with Dummies and power up your hexes and stuff like that, then your next best bet would be to go for First Strike because it's plus 50% critical power, coded the same as the Dancing with Dummies, so you get some nice synergy there. And then for these last two skills, shoot man, I'd probably go with the Precision just so you can crit more and that's damage, and then Protego Power if you really feel like it. Did I pass one up here? Minus 50% enemy stamina plus defense. Like, this is dumb. This is your last priority, in my opinion. And there you have it. That is the Auror Profession Skill Tree Guide. If you got any questions on this content, comment below. Let me know and I'll help you out. And if you like this content and you want to see more like it, well then make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. Overall, I'd say this defense, wow.